I always thought red rooms were one of those internet stories that people created because they sounded scary. You know the kind. A rumor that gets passed around online. A story that becomes bigger every time someone tells it. Someone claims they saw something. Someone else claims they know someone who found it. Eventually, nobody knows what is real anymore. That was how I saw red rooms. A myth, a dark web legend. Something people talked about late at night because the idea of it was terrifying. The concept was simple. A hidden website where people could supposedly watch live violence. A place where wealthy criminals could pay to control what happened. A secret corner of the internet where people were no longer just watching videos. They were watching real events. For years, I dismissed it. I thought it was just another example of the internet creating monsters. A modern ghost story. The same way people used to tell stories about haunted houses or cursed objects, except now the haunted place was a website. But then I found something that made me question everything. And the worst part is, I wasn't even looking for it. It started with a conversation, a completely normal conversation. I was on a forum late one night reading about internet mysteries, not the dark web specifically, just strange things people had discovered online. Lost websites, deleted communities, old internet mysteries. I had always found that stuff interesting. There was something fascinating about forgotten parts of the internet, things that existed for years and then disappeared. While reading through comments, I saw someone mention red rooms. Most of the replies were exactly what I expected. People making jokes, people saying they were fake, people posting the usual warnings. Don't look for them. You'll regret it. Nothing good comes from searching. Normally, I would have ignored it, but one comment caught my attention. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't trying to scare anyone. It simply said they aren't what people think they are. That was it. No explanation, no details, just that sentence. I clicked on the username. The account was old, almost 10 years old. There were hundreds of posts. Most were completely normal. Technology, movies, general discussions. Nothing strange, except for one thing. Every few months, scattered between ordinary conversations, the same user would mention hidden websites. Not red rooms specifically. Just strange places online. Places they claimed were experiments. I thought it was probably just someone trying to sound mysterious. There are thousands of people online who pretend to know more than they actually do. But then I saw one of their older posts, a post from years earlier. It had almost no replies. The title was, "I found the audience." The entire post was only 3 sentences. I thought the rumors were fake. I was wrong. They know when you look. At the time, I thought it was creepy. Nothing more. I didn't know that those words would stay in my head for months. I didn't know that I would eventually understand exactly what they meant. Because a few days later, I found the link. I should have ignored it. That is the part I think about the most. Not because I believe clicking a link magically changed everything. Not because I think one mistake ruined my life. But because there was a moment where I had a choice. A very small moment. A moment where I could have closed the page and gone to sleep. And everything that happened afterward might never have happened. The link wasn't posted directly. That would have been too obvious. It was hidden inside a reply from someone who claimed the original poster was lying. They said the person was just trying to scare people. They said red rooms weren't real. Then, underneath that comment, there was another reply, just a string of characters. No explanation, no description, no warning, just a link. Most people ignored it. I almost did, but curiosity got the better of me. I copied it. I opened a separate browser. I used the same kind of precautions everyone online tells you to use when exploring hidden parts of the internet. At the time, I thought that was enough. I thought being careful meant being safe. That was probably the first thing I misunderstood. The website itself wasn't what I expected. There was no disturbing image, no obvious signs of anything illegal, no dramatic message. It was just a black page, a simple interface, almost professional. That was what unsettled me. I expected something obviously dangerous, something that would immediately tell me I was somewhere I shouldn't be. Instead, it looked organized, clean, purposeful. There was a menu, a list of rooms, a chat section, and at the top of the page was a message, private access only. I stared at that for a while. because I hadn't entered anything. I hadn't registered. I hadn't provided information. So why was I seeing a private page? I assumed it was fake, a trick, someone creating a convincing-looking website to scare people. That explanation actually made me feel better, because if it was fake, then none of it mattered. I clicked around. Most sections were empty. Some pages wouldn't load. Some looked like placeholders. Then I saw a section labeled Upcoming. There were several entries, dates, times, anonymous usernames, nothing else. I remember thinking how strange it was. Not scary, just strange. Because if this was a fake website, someone had put a lot of effort into making it look real. I clicked one of the entries. A warning appeared. You are entering a monitored area. I laughed when I saw it. I actually laughed because it seemed so obvious. A fake horror warning. Something designed to make people uncomfortable. I clicked continue. The page loaded. There was a video window, but it wasn't playing. There was only a countdown. No title, no description, just a timer. I sat there looking at it. I don't know exactly what I expected. Maybe I expected something to happen. Maybe I expected proof that it was fake. Instead, I noticed something else. The viewer count. It was increasing, slowly. 1 person, then 3, then 7, then 12. I remember feeling uncomfortable, not because of what I was seeing, because I wasn't seeing anything. It was the idea that other people were there, waiting, watching. The countdown continued, then the chat started moving. At first, it was normal. People making jokes, people asking if it was real, people pretending not to care. Then someone typed something that changed the entire feeling of the room. New viewer detected. I ignored it. I assumed it was part of the website, some automated message. Then another person replied, no, not new, identified. I stopped moving because I realized something. They weren't talking about a username. They weren't talking about an account. They were talking about me. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen. I remember trying to convince myself there was an obvious explanation. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe they said that every time someone joined. Maybe the website had some fake script designed to make visitors uncomfortable. That was the logical explanation, and I wanted it to be true. I moved my mouse toward the browser. I was going to close it. I was done. Whatever this was, I didn't want to be involved. Then another message appeared, this time from a different user. Still using the same username, I froze, because that wasn't a random message. That was a question, a specific one. And the username they mentioned wasn't the one I was using on that website. It was an old username, one I hadn't used in years, a username from a forum I joined when I was younger, a username that I barely even remembered. I looked around my room. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but that was the first time I felt watched, not online, in the room, like someone else was there. Of course, nobody was. The door was locked, the windows were closed, everything was normal. But my brain had already made the connection. Someone knew something about me. And suddenly the distance between the internet and real life felt much smaller. I closed the browser. I disconnected my computer. Then I sat there trying to calm myself down. I told myself it was a trick. Someone had found my old username. That wasn't impossible. Old accounts get discovered all the time. People reuse names. People leave information behind. There was an explanation. There had to be. The problem was, I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. I never used that username publicly. Not with my real identity. Not on anything connected to me. At least I didn't think I did. That uncertainty bothered me. The internet is full of things you forget. Old profiles, old comments, old conversations. Things that felt meaningless at the time. But years later, they can become pieces of a much larger picture. I spent the rest of the night searching through my old accounts. I found nothing. No obvious connection, no explanation. Eventually, I convinced myself it was over. A strange experience, a creepy website, someone trying to scare visitors. That was all. Then the next morning, I received a message. Not online, on my phone. A text message from an unknown number. It only contained 4 words. You left too early. I stared at it, because there was no reason anyone should have my number. I changed numbers years earlier. I didn't use it for any public accounts. I didn't post it anywhere. I deleted the message immediately. Then I stopped, because I realized something. If someone wanted to scare me, deleting it was exactly what they would expect. So I took a screenshot instead. I saved it, And for some reason, that decision made me feel worse. Because saving the message felt like admitting it was real. Like I was no longer dealing with some strange website. I was collecting evidence. The rest of the day, I tried to act normal. I went to work, I spoke to people, I did everything I normally did, but my mind kept going back to the same question. How did they know? Not just my username, not just my old accounts. How did they know where to reach me? That night, I checked the website again. I told myself I wouldn't, but I did. The page looked different. The countdown was gone. The chat was empty. The video window had disappeared. There was only one message, pinned at the top. It said, "Subject has confirmed awareness." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I thought someone was going to break into my house. Not because I believed there was someone standing outside watching me. At least, that's what I told myself. The real reason I couldn't sleep was much simpler. I didn't know what was real anymore. That is the thing nobody tells you about fear. The worst part isn't always believing something bad is happening. The worst part is not knowing whether you're imagining it. Because if someone breaks into your house, you know what happened. If someone threatens you, you know what happened. But when someone leaves small signs, when something feels wrong but you can't prove it, your own mind becomes the thing you can't escape. The next morning, I checked everything. My phone, my computer, my accounts. I changed passwords. I removed old applications. I checked my email history. Nothing. No evidence. No explanation. Just that message. You left too early. I kept looking at the screenshot, trying to find something I missed. A clue. A mistake. Anything. Then I noticed something. The number wasn't random. It had a pattern. It wasn't a normal mobile number. It looked like it had been created specifically for sending messages. I showed it to a friend who knew more about phones than I did. He looked at it and immediately asked, "Why are you receiving messages from this?" I told him the short version. I didn't mention the red room. I didn't mention the website. I just said someone had found old information about me. He asked one question. How old was the information? I told him. Years. He looked uncomfortable. That's the part I'd worry about. Why? Because finding an old username isn't difficult. Anyone can do that, but finding the person behind it takes effort. That sentence stayed with me, because it was exactly what I had been thinking. The username wasn't the scary part. The scary part was the connection. Someone had connected an old identity to my current one. They had found the person behind the account. Me. After that conversation, I started looking at my online history differently. I searched for my old usernames, not because I wanted to, because I needed to know what was out there, and I found things I had completely forgotten. Old comments, old profiles, old conversations, nothing dangerous, nothing embarrassing, just pieces of myself scattered around the internet. And that was the part that disturbed me. I had always imagined someone finding private information about me, something hidden, something stolen. But the truth was much simpler. Most of what they needed was already there. I had left breadcrumbs everywhere. I just never imagined someone would follow them. That evening, something happened that made me stop thinking this was just an online prank. I came home and noticed my curtains were open. I always closed them before leaving. Always. It was a habit, a small thing. But I knew. I stood outside my apartment door for almost a minute. I didn't want to go inside. I remember thinking, if something is wrong, don't go in alone. That was the first time I admitted to myself that I was scared. Not curious, not interested, scared. I called a friend and asked if I could stay with them for the night. I didn't explain everything. I just said I felt uncomfortable being alone. They agreed. I packed a small bag, and before leaving, I made one mistake. I looked back at my computer. The screen was off. Everything seemed normal. But sitting there on my desk was my phone, and on it was a new notification, a message from the same unknown number. This time it wasn't a sentence. It was a photo of my front door, taken from outside. I didn't move. I just stood there staring at the photo. The first thought that entered my mind was that it had to be fake. That was the only thing keeping me calm. A fake photo, a random image, someone trying to scare me, because the alternative was impossible. The photo showed my front door, not a similar door, not a building entrance that looked like mine, my door. The small scratch near the handle, the faded number beside it. The mark on the wall where someone had scraped against the paint while moving furniture. Details that nobody online should have known. I zoomed in. I looked at the timestamp. There wasn't one. The image had been stripped of information, which somehow made it worse. If there had been a timestamp, I could have checked it. I could have proved it was old. I could have found a reason. Instead, I was left with a question. When was this taken? I didn't sleep at my friend's place that night. I barely rested. Every sound outside made me look toward the window. Every car that slowed down made me wonder if someone was inside. Every person walking past made me question whether they were looking at the building. The rational part of my brain kept telling me I was overreacting. But fear doesn't listen to logic, especially when someone has shown you proof that they can reach you. The next morning, I did something I should have done earlier. I contacted the police. I explained that I had received threatening messages and a photo of my home. I left out some details at first, not because I was hiding anything, because saying it out loud sounded ridiculous. I found a website on the dark web. Someone from it found me. They sent me a photo. Even saying it made me feel like I was describing a movie. The officer who took my statement was polite, professional. But I could tell they had heard similar things before. Not the exact situation, but the general idea. People being harassed online, people being manipulated, people being scared by someone who knew too much. They asked if I knew who sent the messages. I said no. They asked if I had any idea how they found me. I said no. Then they asked the question I was afraid of. Why do you think this person is targeting you? I didn't have an answer, because I honestly didn't know. That was the worst part. There was no argument, no revenge, no reason. I wasn't wealthy. I wasn't famous. I wasn't someone who had information worth stealing. I was just someone who clicked a link. The officer told me something that actually helped. People who do this usually want a reaction. I looked at him. What do you mean? They want you scared. They want you searching. They want you trying to figure them out. That sounded familiar, almost too familiar, because that was exactly what had happened. The website, the messages, the hints, everything was designed to make me look closer, to make me investigate, to make me keep going. That was when I started wondering something. What if the Red Room wasn't the point? What if nobody cared whether I watched it? What if the entire thing was built around finding the people who tried? The people who clicked, the people who searched, the people who couldn't leave a mystery alone. I went back through the messages, every single one, and I noticed something I hadn't seen before. They never threatened me, not once. They never said they would hurt me. They never demanded money. They never told me to stop. They were just observing, commenting, waiting, almost like they were studying my reaction. That realization made me feel colder than any threat could have, because it meant this wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about revenge. It was about curiosity. My curiosity, and whoever was behind this wanted to see how far I would go. For the next few days, I tried to do something that felt impossible. I tried to ignore it. I stopped checking the messages. I stopped looking at the website. I stopped searching my name. I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't trapped in some endless cycle. Because I started to realize something. The more I reacted, the more power I gave whoever was behind it. Every search, every investigation, every late night spent trying to understand, it was exactly what they wanted. So I stopped. At least, I tried to. But the problem with fear is that it doesn't disappear just because you stop looking. It follows you. I started noticing things I had never paid attention to before. A car that appeared outside my building more than once. A person walking behind me for a few blocks before turning away. A notification appearing at a strange time. Most of those things probably meant nothing. That's what made it so difficult. Because I couldn't tell the difference anymore. Was I actually noticing things? Or was my brain searching for threats? I had become the person who looked over their shoulder. The person checking reflections in windows. The person who avoided sitting with their back to a door. And I hated that. I hated what it was turning me into. Then, a week later, I received another message. This time it wasn't from the unknown number. It was from the forum account. The old account that had originally led me there. The account that belonged to the person who had written, "They know when you look." The message was simple. I tried to warn you. I stared at it for a long time, because that changed everything. Until that moment, I had assumed the person who posted about the archive was involved, part of the group, someone trying to lure people in. But now I wasn't sure. I replied, I shouldn't have. I knew that. But I needed answers. I asked, "Who are you?" The reply came almost instantly. I was you. That was the first message. Then another appeared. I found it the same way. Another. I thought I was investigating them. Another. I was wrong. I sat there reading those words, because suddenly I wasn't alone. Someone else had gone through this. Someone else had followed the same path. I asked what happened to them. There was a long pause. Then they replied, I disappeared. I didn't understand. You are literally messaging me. Another pause. Then not anymore. The account went offline. Permanently. The profile disappeared. The messages remained. But the account itself was gone. Deleted. Like it had never existed. I spent the next hour trying to find anything about the person. I searched the username. Nothing. I searched old posts. Nothing. It was like the account had been erased from the internet. But one thing remained. The original post. The one that had started everything. I found the audience. Except now there was something different. A reply I hadn't noticed before. A reply posted years earlier. A reply from an account with no name. It said, everyone thinks the audience is watching. Nobody asks who is watching the audience. I closed my laptop, because for the first time I understood something. The Red Room wasn't just a place. It was a trap built around attention. The people watching. The people searching. The people investigating. Everyone was part of the same system. And I had no idea which side I was on. After that message, I stopped thinking about the Red Room as a website. That was the mistake I had made from the beginning. I thought I had discovered a place, a hidden corner of the internet, something separate from normal life. But I was starting to understand that the website was only a doorway. The real thing existed outside of it. The people, the information, the connections, the way strangers online could piece together someone's identity from almost nothing. That was the part that scared me, not the idea of some hidden website, the idea that someone could know me without ever meeting me. I started looking into the history of the account that had warned me, not through the website, through normal searches, old posts, archived pages, anything I could find. Eventually, I discovered something. The person behind that account had not vanished recently. They had disappeared years earlier. The last public activity from the account was almost 8 years before I found it. That didn't make sense, because the message they sent me had appeared only days earlier. Someone was using the account. But who and why? I kept digging. I found old conversations between that account and other users. Most were ordinary, but there was a pattern. Every few months, the same person would warn someone else. A different username, a different website, a different situation. But always the same message. Don't look further, don't respond, don't investigate. At first, I thought that person was trying to protect people. Then I found something that changed my mind. Every person they warned eventually disappeared from those communities. Not physically, not officially. Their accounts simply stopped being active. No explanation, no goodbye, nothing. Just silence. I sat there looking at those old conversations, and I realized something. The person who warned me wasn't just another victim. They had been doing this for years. They had been watching for people who found the same thing. People like me. But why? That question kept bothering me. Was it because they wanted to help, or was there another reason? The next day, I received another message. This time, there was no text, just a file, a video file. I almost didn't open it. Everything in me said not to, but curiosity had already gotten me this far. And that was the thing I hated admitting. Even after everything, even after being scared, even after knowing what curiosity had caused, I still wanted answers. I opened the file. The video was short, less than a minute. At first, I couldn't understand what I was looking at. It was just a room, an empty room, a chair, a camera, nothing else. Then the camera moved. Not much, just enough. And I saw something that made me stop breathing. On the wall behind the chair was a symbol, the same symbol from the archive, the same symbol I had seen in old posts, the same symbol that appeared everywhere connected to this mystery. But there was something else, something that made my hands go cold. The video wasn't old. It wasn't from some hidden website. It wasn't from years ago. The timestamp on the file showed it had been recorded that morning, and the final seconds of the video showed something reflected in the glass beside the camera. A person standing behind it, watching. The person wasn't facing the camera, they were facing whoever was sitting in the chair. And then, just before the video ended, they turned directly toward the lens, like they knew someone would be watching. I watched that video 3 times. I don't know why. The first time I was shocked. The second time I was looking for details. The third time I was trying to convince myself I had misunderstood what I saw. That was the pattern I had fallen into. Something frightening happened. I searched for an explanation. The explanation made things worse. So I searched again. I was trapped in the same cycle that had started this whole thing. The video itself didn't prove anything. That was the problem. It was designed to make me question. There was no message, no clear threat, no name, no location, just enough information to make my imagination do the rest. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore: the room. I recognized it, not because I had seen it before, because I had seen something similar. Months earlier, when I first discovered the website, there was a background image hidden in one of the pages. I barely noticed it at the time. A blurry photograph. A plain room. A chair. I assumed it was just decoration, but now I wasn't sure. I went back through everything I had saved. I found the image. I compared it to the video. Same wall, same mark in the corner, same placement of the chair. It was the same room, which meant one of two things. Either someone had recreated the image, or the website had been showing a real place all along. I didn't know which option was worse. I started looking into the symbol, not the dark web, not hidden forums, just the symbol itself. I searched variations, images, old references, anything. At first I found nothing. Then, buried in an old discussion, I found a mention, not of the symbol, of the idea behind it. The person writing about it described something called the observer effect, not the scientific concept, something else, a belief. The idea that watching something changes it, that being aware of something makes you part of it. I thought it sounded ridiculous, until I read the next part. According to the post, certain online groups used this idea as a form of psychological testing. They weren't interested in everyone. They were interested in people who reacted, people who investigated, people who couldn't ignore a mystery. The post ended with a warning. Once you become aware of the watcher, you become part of the observation. I closed the page, because suddenly everything made sense, or at least it made a different kind of sense. The Red Room wasn't necessarily about violence. It wasn't necessarily about what happened inside the room. It was about attention. It was about finding people who would follow a trail, people who would keep looking, people who would prove they couldn't walk away. And I had done exactly that. I started thinking about the first link again, the one hidden in the forum, the one that supposedly led nowhere. What if it wasn't random? What if it wasn't someone posting a link? What if it was placed there specifically for people like me? That night I checked my email. I don't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe paranoia. But there was a new message. No sender, no subject, only an attachment, a photograph. I opened it. It was my apartment building, taken from across the street. But this time, the photo wasn't of the entrance. It was of my window, and the lights were on. I hadn't been home for 3 hours. I called the police again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I didn't worry about sounding ridiculous. I didn't worry that they wouldn't understand. Because at that point, I didn't need anyone to believe the entire story. I just needed someone to understand one simple fact. Someone was watching me. The officer who arrived remembered me. I could tell from the expression on his face, he recognized my name. He recognized the situation. And for the first time, I noticed something different. He didn't look skeptical. He looked concerned. I showed him everything, the messages, the photos, the video, the old accounts, everything I had collected. He looked through it all quietly. Then he asked me something I wasn't expecting. "Have you ever met anyone connected to this?" I thought about it. "No." He looked at the screen again. "Are you sure?" That question bothered me, because it sounded like he knew something I didn't. I asked him what he meant. He hesitated. Then he told me something. A few weeks earlier, they had received another report. Someone else claiming they were being followed. someone else connected to strange online activity. The details were similar, not identical, but similar enough that it stood out. I asked if the person was okay. He didn't answer immediately. That silence told me everything. They disappeared? He looked away. Nobody knows. That was when I realized something. The people who found the Red Room weren't being targeted because they discovered something. They were being connected because they discovered each other. It wasn't a single victim. It was a pattern, a chain. Everyone who found it became another point in a network. And the more people who searched, the bigger the network became. After the officer left, I sat in my apartment for hours. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't listen to music. I just sat there. Because I was finally exhausted, not physically, mentally. I was tired of being afraid, tired of questioning every notification, tired of wondering if every stranger was connected. And that's when I made a decision. I was going to find the source, not because I wanted answers anymore, because I wanted it to stop. I knew searching was dangerous. I knew it was exactly what they wanted. But I also knew something else. Running had not worked. Ignoring it had not worked. So I went back. One final time. I opened the website. Except this time something was different. The page didn't load normally. There was no menu, no chat, no rooms, just a single message. It appeared slowly, almost like someone was typing it live. Welcome back. I stared at the screen. Then another line appeared. We wondered when you would return. My hands were shaking, because I finally understood. They had never been trying to keep me away. Every warning, every threat, every attempt to scare me. It wasn't designed to make me leave. It was designed to make me come back. Another message appeared. You have been asking the wrong question. I waited. A final line appeared. You keep asking who is watching. The screen went black. Then one last message appeared. You should have been asking, who is being watched? I sat there staring at the screen, waiting. I don't know what I expected. A person to appear, a message, an explanation, something that would finally make everything make sense. But nothing happened. The page stayed black. For a few seconds I thought it was over. Then my speakers turned on. I hadn't touched anything. A voice started playing, not distorted, not disguised, just a normal voice, calm, almost conversational. You're probably wondering how this started. I froze, because the voice wasn't coming from the website. It was coming from my computer. The same computer I had disconnected from the internet. The same computer I had spent weeks checking. The voice continued. You think this is about a website? It isn't. You think this is about a red room? It isn't. I reached for the power button, then stopped. Because I realized something. I had been trying to prove I was in control. Closing pages, deleting files, changing accounts, running away. But the entire time, I had never actually known how far this went. The voice continued. The mistake people make is believing the internet is a place. It's not. It's a connection. I listened. I hated that I listened. But after everything that had happened, I needed to know. You found a rumor. You searched for proof. You found people who had searched before you. Then you became part of the same pattern. I looked around my room. Everything felt unfamiliar. My own apartment, my own belongings, my own life. Because suddenly I felt like I was looking at everything from the outside. The voice continued. The Red Room story has existed for years because people are fascinated by the idea of hidden violence. They imagine the worst thing online is what someone might do, but they never consider what someone might learn. That sentence stayed with me because it explained everything. The website, the messages, the tracking, the attention. It wasn't about hurting people, not directly. It was about understanding them, studying reactions, finding out what people did when they were afraid. The voice continued. We don't create fear. We reveal it. I hated how much that sounded like something someone would actually believe. Not a criminal, not a villain, someone who thought they were doing something meaningful. Someone who had convinced themselves that watching people was justified. Then the voice said something that made my entire body go cold. You still don't understand why you were chosen. I hadn't moved. Chosen? The word came out before I realized I had spoken. The voice replied immediately. Yes, chosen. You think you found us by accident. You didn't. I felt my stomach drop, because that was the one possibility I had refused to consider. that I wasn't just another person who clicked a link, that I wasn't just unlucky. The voice continued. Your curiosity was noticed long before you found the room. I looked at the computer screen. What does that mean? A pause. Then it means we knew you would look. The screen changed. A folder appeared. No title, no label, just my name. I didn't open it. I couldn't, because after everything I had seen, I already knew what would be inside. My history, my searches, my forgotten accounts, my digital footprint. A complete record of how I became the person sitting in front of that screen. Then the voice said one final thing. Everyone thinks the red room is where people watch, but they never ask who built the room. The computer shut down, completely. And for the first time in months, there was silence. I didn't turn the computer back on. Not that night, not the next day. For almost a week, it stayed exactly where it was, sitting on my desk, a normal object that had somehow become the thing I feared most. That was the strange part. Nothing about it looked different. It wasn't damaged. It wasn't making strange noises. There was no sign that anything had happened. It was just a computer, a piece of technology. But after everything I had experienced, I knew better than most people that ordinary things can become terrifying when you know what they are capable of. Eventually, I got rid of it. Not dramatically. I didn't smash it. I didn't destroy it. I just removed it from my life. Because I realized something important. The computer was never the source of the problem. The website wasn't the source. The files weren't the source. The source was the fact that I had spent so long trying to understand something that didn't want to be understood. I had given it my attention, my time, my fear, and maybe that was all it ever needed. After that, things slowly returned to normal. I moved apartments. I changed my routines. I started over, not because I was running away, because I needed to prove to myself that my life was bigger than that experience. For a while it worked. Months passed, then years. Eventually, I stopped checking behind me. I stopped looking for signs. I stopped assuming every strange event had a hidden meaning. I started feeling like myself again. Almost. Because there was still one thing I never forgot. The folder. The one with my name. I never opened it. That decision bothered me for a long time. Because a part of me always wondered what was inside. Maybe it was everything I expected, a collection of information, a profile, a history. Maybe it contained nothing important at all. Maybe the entire thing was just another psychological trick, a final attempt to keep me interested. But another part of me knew something. Sometimes not knowing is the only thing that protects you. Years later, I received one final message. I almost ignored it. In fact, I did ignore it at first. It was from an old email address, one I hadn't used in years. The subject line was empty. The message contained no explanation, just a link. For a few minutes, I stared at it. The old version of me would have clicked immediately. The old version of me would have needed to know. But I wasn't that person anymore. I deleted it. Then I blocked the address. And that was the end, or at least I thought it was. A few days later, I received another email. Different address, same message, a link, no words. I deleted it too. Then another and another, always different addresses, always the same link. I never opened it. I never searched it. I never responded. Eventually they stopped, and I haven't received one since. But there is one thing I still think about. The reason those messages bothered me wasn't because they proved someone was still watching. It was because they proved something else. Someone knew exactly what would tempt me. They knew I would want to look. They knew curiosity was the weakness they could always use. And maybe that's the real danger of the internet. Not the hidden websites, not the rumors, not the things people warn you about. The real danger is that somewhere out there, there is always something designed to make you click. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had never clicked that link. If I had ignored the comment, if I had laughed at the rumors like everyone else, if I had closed the page and gone to sleep, maybe nothing would have happened. Maybe the entire thing would have passed me by. But there's another possibility. Maybe someone else would have found it. Maybe someone else would have followed the same path. Maybe the red room was never about finding a person. Maybe it was about finding a certain type of person, someone curious enough to look, someone stubborn enough to continue, someone who needed answers more than they feared the consequences. And if that's true, then I wasn't chosen because I was special. I was chosen because I was predictable. That thought bothered me for a long time. The idea that someone could understand my behavior before I understood it myself. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. They weren't predicting me. They were predicting people. Humans are more predictable than we like to admit. Give someone a mystery and they investigate. Show someone something forbidden and they want to see. Tell someone not to look, and eventually, many people will. That isn't a weakness. It's just human nature. And whoever created that world understood that better than anyone. They didn't need to force people. They didn't need to chase them. They just needed to leave a door slightly open. Someone would always walk through. I never found out what happened to the other people connected to the Red Room. I never searched for them again. Part of me wants to know. Part of me still wonders if they escaped, if they moved on, if they are somewhere right now living normal lives and trying to forget. But I know better than to look, because that is how it starts. It always starts with one question, one search, one click. And before you know it, you are no longer looking for answers. You are looking for the next thing, the next clue, the next hidden piece. I think that's why I decided to tell this story. Not because I want people to be afraid of the internet. The internet isn't a monster. It's just a reflection of people. The good, the bad, the curious, the dangerous. Everything exists somewhere online. But just because something exists doesn't mean you need to find it. There are some doors that stay closed for a reason. Some things are hidden because they should remain hidden. And some mysteries are better left unsolved. Because the scariest thing I discovered wasn't that there might be people watching. It wasn't that someone could find information about me. It wasn't even that a place like the Red Room might exist. The scariest thing I discovered was something much simpler. Sometimes, the thing looking back at you from the other side of the screen isn't the person you were searching for, it's yourself. And once you realize that, you can never completely go back to the way things were. There is one final detail I never told anyone. Not because I was trying to hide it, because I didn't know what it meant. A few months after I deleted the last message, I received a notification from an account I had completely forgotten about. It wasn't an email. It wasn't a forum. It wasn't connected to anything I had used recently. It was an old account from years ago. An account I hadn't logged into since before I ever discovered the Red Room. The notification said someone had accessed it. At first I assumed it was just another attempt to get my attention, another trick, another person trying to see if I would react. But when I logged in, there was no message, no link, no warning, just one thing, a change to the profile. The username had been altered, not replaced, not deleted, altered slightly, just enough to make it different, just enough that someone had edited it. And underneath the username was a new profile picture, a simple image, a black screen, a white symbol, the same symbol. I stared at it for a long time, because that was the first time in years that I felt the old fear return. Not panic, not the overwhelming fear I had felt before. Something quieter, a small reminder, a feeling that maybe some things don't disappear, they just wait. I closed the account, I deleted it completely, and this time I didn't investigate. I didn't search the symbol, I didn't look for the website, I didn't try to understand because I finally accepted something. There are some mysteries where finding the answer doesn't make you safer. It only gives the mystery more of you, your attention, your time, your thoughts, your life. And maybe that was the real purpose of everything. Not the Red Room, not the website, not the people behind it. Maybe the real trap was convincing someone that they needed to keep looking. Because as long as you are searching, you are still connected. I don't know if the Red Room was real, not in the way people imagine. Maybe there was never a place where people watched what happened. Maybe the rumors were exaggerated. Maybe the entire thing was built around fear. But I know one thing. Something found me. Something learned about me. And something understood exactly what I would do when I saw a mystery. I would look. That is the part I struggle with the most. Not that someone was watching. Not that someone was collecting information. But that, for a while, I was exactly the person they were looking for. Someone who couldn't walk away. Someone who needed to know. someone who opened the door. And once you open a door like that, sometimes the hardest thing isn't discovering what is behind it. Sometimes the hardest thing is convincing yourself to close it again.